He was a fighter all his life.
In boxing, in politics, he was a fighter.
But the fight to get him justice is not finished.
This is the story of my brother.
This is the story of the man I was imprisoned with.
This is the story of my old sparring partner.
This is the story of the man I was held hostage with.
Floreal García.
Floreal García.
Floreal García.
Floreal García.
Uruguay, one of the smallest countries in South America, but one of the world's most progressive. It was the first nation to legalize marijuana, the first to win football's World Cup, and the first in Latin America to establish a welfare state. However, from 1973 to 1985, Uruguay was governed under a military dictatorship which aimed to quash the rise of communism. At one time, it had the highest percentage of political prisoners per capita in the world. During this era, Uruguay became known as the torture chamber of Latin America due to the extreme degrees of terror used to extract information from detractors of the regime. One man who suffered at the hands of the dictatorship was Gualberto Floreal Garcia, a Pan-American boxing champion, a political activist, and victim of the 1974 Soca murders.
He was a man with a great heart and great empathy.
Floreal was a strong person.
He was a very humble boy, but he was a hero without a doubt.
His principles ultimately turned out to be stronger than what he wanted to do with his sporting abilities in boxing.
Uruguay Garcia is one of Floreal's 4 siblings. Throughout the 1950s, the family lived in the Los Olivos region of Montevideo, where gang culture and poverty were prevalent. It wasn't uncommon for Floreal and his siblings to share a mere cup of coffee for their evening meal. When he was 14, Floreal's parents divorced due to his father's alcoholism. Floreal struggled with the separation, but rather than turn to the murky underworld of the streets, he turned to boxing.
At the time, people used to see it as a means of taking your family out of poverty. We grew up surrounded by misery, and you get used to it. You're like a chained dog. You get used to it. He was motivated by boxing, though, and he liked it.
For Floreal, boxing became everything. He joined the El Canichitas boxing club and would rarely miss a training session. Hugo Garcia was his sparring partner.
The main objective for him was to be in peak condition, physically. The way he trained was unreal. You would see him skipping with the rope, then he'd be back in the ring. Others would stop, but he kept going non-stop. He was simply amazing.
In 1963, Floreal Garcia became an overnight sensation, clinching gold at the Pan American Games in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Cheered on from the stands by his sparring partner Hugo, he defeated home favourite Pedro Diaz by a unanimous decision.
When the fight started, We knew exactly what he would do. Punch his opponent constantly until the end.
The family couldn't move from the radio.
Floreal crushed him. The Brazilian was almost on the floor, grabbing at the ropes.
When they announced that he was the winner, the whole neighborhood jumped for joy.
I simply started crying. Tears of happiness, of course. I was thinking about our neighborhood, what he'd done for them.
A year later, Floreal was expected to become a star of the Tokyo Olympics. However, he pulled out just days before the start, aggrieved that he had not been offered the financial security that other Uruguayan athletes had.
Floreal told them that he wanted to go to Japan with the certainty that his family had food on their plate to eat. And he said he wanted a job or a wage, otherwise he would not go.
I said, Gualberto, you have a great opportunity to be an Olympic champion. He replied, I know it's important, but I was promised so many things, and look where we are now.
At the time, civil unrest was brewing in Uruguay. Floreal believed his treatment by the Boxing Federation was symptomatic of the inequalities in society at large. He subsequently joined the National Liberation Movement, otherwise known as the Tupamaros. To some, the Tupamaros were a leftist philanthropic group that stole from the rich to give to the poor. To others, they were nothing more than a terrorist organization. José López Mercado was also a member of the group.
The concentration of power, the financialization of the country, the strong abuse of salaried employees, and the gradual process of deindustrialization in the country. During the 1960s, we witnessed the beginning of a process that led to an authoritative and dictatorial government.
Supposedly to combat the threat of the likes of the Tupamaros, Uruguay ushered in a military dictatorship that involved mass incarceration, torture, and forced displacements. Floreal Garcia was just one man that the authorities were set on silencing. On the 27th of June 1971, Floreal was arrested for his association with the Tupamaros. He spent 8 months incarcerated alongside José López Mercado. He missed the birth of his only son, Amaral.
We were treated in a very strict way.
We saw him suffer a lot, mainly when he was in Punta de Rieles. He told me that he didn't want to be imprisoned anymore.
Floreal was eventually granted release on the condition that he leave the country. He moved to Buenos Aires in Argentina, but his freedom here was short-lived. He became a victim of Operation Condor, a South American intelligence operation to forcibly displace or execute opponents of the continent-wide dictatorships. In 1974, Floreal was kidnapped and taken to this house, amongst others, in Montevideo, where he was brutally tortured. His captors beat him, submerged him in water, and electrocuted him from his testicles. Julio Abreu was also taken hostage, but later released unharmed after they found him to have no association with the Tupamaros.
I heard Floreal screaming loudly. He knew his fate. His genitals looked like a mass of burnt flesh. They were completely burnt, impossible to recognize if you tried to figure it out. I remember his entire face had marks and bruises. His lips, gums, teeth, ears, eyes, eyelids. Not a single part of his body was left unharmed. Floreal looked like a monster after the horrific torture he endured. Those are memories that stay with you. He destroyed me as a man and as a human being.
I
thought that once I'd been released, I would be free. But I was still a prisoner. I became an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic. But I stopped drinking 9 years ago. I used to be a wreck. I'd wet myself on the streets. I wanted to die.
On the 21st of December 1974, Floreal's body was discovered alongside his wife's on the outskirts of Montevideo. His 3-year-old son, Amaral, was spared death, but he was forcibly displaced to Argentina. For 10 years, he was unknowingly raised by the very intelligence agents that turned his parents in to the authorities. In the 4 decades that have elapsed since Floreal Garcia's murder, the perpetrators have never been identified or held accountable.
It was horrible. I remember feeling very happy in the morning to feeling absolutely hopeless in the afternoon.
I was devastated because the way he was killed was barbaric. It went beyond the most miserable political act.
He shouldn't be forgotten.
Memory is an essential requirement for justice. There's no justice without memory.
I try not to think about him, but I do.
That is why my motto today is truth and memory. Because there has been no justice in this country. It does not exist.
The military dictatorship was a turning point for many families. It broke them, and the effects of the regime can still be seen. It was devastating. But he is still in my heart. He was our champion.